All right, guys, we're talking about the statistics chapter 2 project today. So normally this would be a group project, but we're going to be doing this individually for this year. So I want to kind of go over the process here. So there's really going to be three different things I'm going to need you to gather data on. So the first one is going to be a set of quantitative data, meaning that you're going to have a numerical response to it. So that'd be things like how tall someone is, the number of M&Ms in a bag, whatever thing gives you a variable that is a numerical response there. Then the second thing that we're going to need to get is a set of qualitative data. So that is when it is not numerical. It's going to be categorical. So like, what's your favorite color? What state is someone from? Stuff like that. And then the third, which we're going to need to do, is a measurement over time. So this could be anything which you measure, and again, this does need to be numerical. But so like you could do the temperature at noon every day for 10 days. So something along those lines there. I'm going to go a little bit more in detail about each of like those, but that's the kind of general three things that we're looking for. So the first one, we need a set of quantitative data. So when we do that, you want to make sure that your data is going to be varied enough that like you're going to actually be able to get different classes when you make a frequency chart for it. Like if I do, hey, what's everyone's age in my stats class, you're going to get basically 2 or 3 different possible responses, and that's it. You need a bit more of a range there. Try and do something where there's going to be at least some kind of spread in the numbers you're going to get as your responses for it. Once you have that, you're going to be making a few things for me. You're going to first be making a distribution chart. And on that, I want the class limits, the class boundaries, the frequency, the relative frequency, and the class midpoints in that chart. Once you have that chart made, use that chart to create a histogram. You can make a relative frequency histogram if you prefer, whichever one you think is going to be more relevant for your data. And then you're going to make an ogive based off of the data, and then a stem and leaf plot based off of the data. So, sorry, normally you wouldn't need to have the same data presented in all these different ways, but it's just, I don't want to make you find 4 different sets of data and then present them in these charts here. Then our qualitative data. So a little bit fewer things here. For the qualitative, again, make sure you have it shouldn't be a yes or no thing. It should have at least 3 or 4 kind of different categories which people could be responding to. You also don't want it to be so broad that you get a different response from every single person. So like if you ask, hey, what's your mother's first name, right? You're going to get so many different responses that's going to be not really a usable thing for us. That's the thing which you could do if you had a huge sample size, but we're going to stick with like 35. So you're probably going to want to do something that you're going to get some variety, but not so much that you have 35 different responses to it. Once you have that data, you're going to be making 2 things for me. First, a pair 2 chart for it, which is a type of bar graph. So as opposed to making a bar graph and a pair 2, just make a pair 2 because it is a special type of bar graph. And then make a circle graph for it. Lastly here, we're going to take our measurement over time data, and you're going to make a time series graph for that. So on those ones, pick something which you can measure at equal intervals. Doing a thing once a day is probably going to, while that's a great way to do things, the problem is we don't really have 10 days to just let you wait and gather a piece of data every day for 10 days just because of timing. I'm going to have this due in a shorter time period than that. So try and pick a thing which you could do maybe 3 measurements a day. You measure something every 8 hours. Or you could go even shorter, like you're going to measure it every hour for a 10-hour period during a day, stuff like that. So once you have all of those different graphs made, you're then going to answer these questions. So I have these questions here. Describe the shape of your quantitative data. which visual representation of your quantitative data most clearly um, and it most clearly represents it. So you're going to have a bunch of different options here. So which of these things is going to be the best way to kind of show the data which you're trying to show? Because some of them are going to be better than others. And part of having you do multiples from the same data is you can see, well, which one of these shows more easily and visually what I'm trying to, or what responses I actually got. I'm not going to read through all of these. You guys can do that. But the big other note that I want to make here is that all of your graphs and charts need to be handmade. I know that there's a lot of programs which make things really easy for you. But the whole point of this is I want you to physically make it by hand. This is the only time I'm going to force you to make your graphs by hand, because making them by hand really reinforces how they are made and the different parts of them that are important. I also want to point out my golden rule as far as graphs and charts go. If I look at your graph, I should be able to tell everything about it just from looking at it. So you want to have it titled and labeled and clearly displayed, so that even if I didn't know what your data was on, I could look at the graph and figure it out. So like it's titled, hey, the heights of students in so-and-so's class, right? Whatever, something along those lines. The last thing that I need to address is kind of how we're going to be gathering this data. So again, I would prefer you to not do survey data for this. I normally wouldn't under normal circumstances, but since we are trying to kind of avoid contact as much as possible, I'm going to kind of pressure you into trying to find other types of data which we can get that is not via a survey. So think about some kind of scientific experiment, right? What things could you measure and gather data in that way? I've had students who were into baseball and they were looking at, and they had a speedometer and they measured how fast they were throwing a fastball pitch, right? So they did 35 pitches and they measured the speed of each of like those and used that for their quantitative data. So it means something that simple, right? Granted, you have to throw a bunch of fastballs, but you can kind of get good data there and say, hey, here's the distribution of my fastball throws. I've had students who were in volleyball who they would serve 10 times and then measure the percentage of times that their serve was in, right? I've had tennis players do the exact same thing, right? The problem with those ones is if you're going to make it a percentage, 1% is one singular response. So you would need to get 35 percentages from sets of like 10 or 20 or whatever. So something that's going to be really an ungodly number of things to like do, you might want to avoid that or be a little bit careful, but that is an option for you. So try and be creative. I really try and say, hey, look at the things you're passionate about and make your project focused around that. So like, hey, I'm really into baseball. I'm going to try and do all my data that's baseball related, because when it's a thing you enjoy, you're going to actually end up liking it a whole lot more and enjoy the actual process. If you're really having trouble trying to think of things, you can come and talk to me. We're going to have a decent email time for this one. And also the PDF of this is going to be available on Google Classroom, so you can find it there. So if you have any questions, please talk to me or email me, and I'll try and sort those out as best as I can. But until then, I will talk to you guys next time.